So we don't have human issues, okay? We don't have human issues. We have spiritual issues. Spiritual issues. And the sooner and the deeper we understand this, the more conscious we'll become, the more intentional about our own healing work we will be, right? As individuals and within community as well, when we address the bigger issue, which is spiritual, right? We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So that means the issues that we have foundationally are a corruption within the spirit. Now, in my last video, I mentioned white supremacy and how white supremacy is a label or a definition that we put on what has occurred in this country, all over the world, actually, right? But what that is a spiritual affliction, period. It's a degeneracy, right? It's a maleficent or malevolent aspect of what we can call the universe or the all. Because here's one thing that has to be understood too. If you're on this journey of spiritual awakening, of being in higher consciousness and studying higher knowledge, you have to review the universal laws. You have to know the universal laws. That is foundational. And one of the main universal law that I want to address right now is that of polarity, when there's always an opposite, right? We live in a duality, and using wordplay with this, right? And phonetics, you hear the word duality, you hear the word duel, which is a fight, right? We are constantly, perpetually in spiritual warfare. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We live in and exist in a duality. We live and exist in a fight. Against what? The other side, okay? There's a neutral and then there are sides. And because we're having a human experience, we have to pick a side. The human experience is an evolutionary chain, right? The human being itself is not a fully evolved being. This is why we're in the state that we're in. Human beings, I'm just going to be layman's, okay? And I'm going to be just as concise as possible, not to lose too many people with this. We're all supposed to be like Jesus, right? If we're talking religiously, right? It doesn't matter if you're traditionally religious or you've denounced religion, you understand the story of Jesus Christ. And we even say it within religious communities, to be like Jesus. All humans are supposed to be like that. All humans. And just let's just pause and just look at humanity. Very far away from that, aren't we? So the human being is not evolved. Like very young. Like we know this scientifically. We hear it all the time. They tell us in the movies, all types of stuff, right? Human, and especially when they do alien movies, and it's like aliens are like, humans are like, you know what I'm saying? Like we're babies compared to everything else that is living in terms of consciousness, right? And entities. But getting back to my point, we live in a duel. We live in a fight. And so as a human experience on the evolutionary chain, right, we have to choose a higher nature or a lower nature. There are people who are afflicted by spiritual forces and spiritual energies that are of that lower nature, and they aren't aware of it, right? Unconscious, subconscious, they're not aware of it. And then there are people who have their spiritual awakenings, which we have pretty much constantly. We've had spiritual awakenings since we were children. We just didn't have anything to call it or name it. You know what I'm saying? But it's like when you become conscious, your third eye activates, right? Or first eye activates, and you start to have a conscious awakening experience. But some people don't ever have those. And so not knowing what kind of reality we live in, one, and then two, not understanding how spiritual affliction and subconscious programming affects the human being, we have the world the way that it is, right? So again, on the evolutionary chain, right, of being a human, we have to choose our higher nature, our lower nature, and keeping ourselves regulating and keeping ourselves at a balance. This is why we have religions. This is why we have spiritual teachings and practices, because we need to keep our humanity in check, or else it'll be what it is, right? We live in peace within our heart, with our connection to our higher power, with our spirit guides, and with how we understand wholeness or oneness, right? BIPOC, right? Black, Indigenous, people of color. We have the strongest foundation of understanding that wholeness comes from the environment itself. And just being a singular being, having a life within yourself is the abundance, and it is the value, and it is the worth, period. No money, no infrastructure, no, you know what I'm saying, hierarchies, no nothing. You living and being with and around nature is your most divine right. It is your most highest abundance, and it is what it means to be living and have a life, right? That's it. And our ancestors knew that. Our heritage is built around teaching those principles and ingraining those kinds of, wisdoms and all that stuff within us, the proverbs, everything. We have that strongest foundation spiritually, okay? And so that always has to be where we go first when it comes to how can we fix things. You need to fix your spirit. We need to fix the spirit. Where is the focus of the spirit? Is the focus on the spirit on what the enemy is doing wrong? Or is the focus of the spirit on what we as the individuals or the conscious ones can be doing to elevate beyond the behaviors in which we don't resonate with? You see what I'm saying? I've been meditating a lot lately and doing a lot of research, specifically about the coming together of Black and red people and Black Indians, and just realizing how much of a powerhouse merge that is. So it's like white supremacist colonizers didn't realize that they were mixing such a powerful ethnic group together on a spiritual level, right? But with their genius of being, sadistic, right? Like every culture has its genius, right? And the culture of malevolence has a genius of being sadistic. And so their sadistic nature is genius in a sense. And I hope people can read between the lines of what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're just extremely amazing. I'm saying the fact that they've had a power to control people the way that they do and create such hostility and such ignorance within societies all over the planet, that's crazy, right? So I say genius in a way where they're the best at being the worst at something. You see what I mean? But it's like they wanted to control, they wanted to separate, they wanted to do all this stuff, but they brought together cultures of people that are extremely powerful, but have been asleep, have been afflicted, have been conditioned, have been programmed by their consciousness. So we've been separated. We don't know who we are. We don't know how to connect. We look at each other as enemies. So we are afflicted by their consciousness. So there's a whole layer of fight that's going on here in terms of spiritual warfare. We're battling a consciousness, right, that we've been programmed and conditioned by. And we're also fighting the spiritual aspect of it, which is the lower natures, right? You can call them the 7 deadly sins because that's a great foundational place to start. I feel like churches should teach a lot more about them. Specifically, like having sermons just about the 7 deadly sins so people can see how they show up in just everyday life, right? Like I said, we don't have human issues. We have spiritual issues. You think the term narcissist, right? The term narcissist has been floating around for so long, right? And everybody's using it loosely and loosely, more loosely and more loosely. When you think about a single person that you may identify as a narcissist, you ask the question, why are they like that? And you look into their upbringing, their parents, their caregivers, and then those people's caregivers and parents, and those people's caregivers and parents, on top of the consciousness that existed in whatever environment they're brought up in. We don't have human issues. We have spiritual issues and consciousness issues. Okay, we have to go back. We have to dig deeper than just person to person because we're not dealing with that. Spiritual beings having a human experience, humans on an evolutionary chain of attempting to be more Christ-like, right? More of a higher nature, but dealing with the programming and conditioning of that malevolence, of that white supremacist, or just simply I'll just say lower nature side, because I don't want to say the dark side, because I don't want to confuse people. I did some videos back about being afraid of the dark and darkness, and how that word, people have a certain idea about it. So I won't say fighting the dark side, although Ephesians 6:12 says the battle is not against flesh, but the dark forces and evil in higher places. But that is, I just want to throw that out there for people who just need a reference. Okay? It's not against flesh and blood, it's against the unseen. So again, we don't have human issues. We have spiritual issues. We have a limitation or blockage of consciousness issues, right? It is very, very deep how affected we are, not as Black, Indigenous people of color, or whatever you identify with, in terms of the mindset, the colonizer mindset, the tendency to want to just conquer and dominate and compete, right? Be the best, show off, vanity, all of those things, greed, having more than what you need, gluttony, you know what I'm saying? And let me just say this, I'm still having a human experience. I am not just the perfect human, okay? I have embodied my shadow. I know my shadow. I know what I battle with, okay? I'm still out here. I'm still out here with you. So I'm saying all this to say, as someone who has reflected, as someone who has studied, and as someone who wants to share this to other people to get a better understanding of where time and energy can be better focused. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be coming together and wanting to collaborate human to human to deal with certain things, right? Because that's what community is for. We need that. However, if we don't address the root, right? Think chakras, the root. What you are in connection to the unseen and the seen. That's how I've grown to understand the root chakra, right? The survival consciousness, the right to survive. Like I said, Black, Indigenous people of color have a foundation of understanding that it is our right to just be. We've had that foundation of I am, and that was the first thing that was taken. That was the first thing that was our root was taken. And then we were force-fed a consciousness that was the complete opposite of ours. 500 years ago, plus. And to this day, we're trying to fight out of it, to get back to nature, our nature, right? We do not have human problems. We have spiritual problems. We have consciousness blocks. But it can be reversed, right? It can be reversed. Things can heal. People can heal. Narcissists can, there's some that can heal and overcome. Absolutely. But, you know, it has to be understood that what we're dealing with is something that's unseen, right? It's internal, right? Mental, spiritual warfare is what we're dealing with. And so we take it upon ourselves to do our inner work, to go seek out our therapy, to go seek out our counseling, okay? And have our isolation time away from people so that we understand our intentions and we understand our energy, right? We learn our energy, how to protect ourselves, boundaries, all of that. We need to know that because we are spiritual beings. We are energetic beings. This is what we're dealing with. Again, Ephesians 6:12 for reference, for biblical reference. Okay, we're dealing with spirits one-on-one. We're dealing with energy one-on-one. And then we have the corporeal existence, okay, that we have to have awareness of at the same time. That was my previous video too, when I was talking about, you know, we can't forget what we may have learned or experienced based on our physical nature, right? Like our race, our ethnicity, our gender. Like, we can't erase that. We can't just throw that to the side. We have to keep an awareness of that. But we also have to be aware of what we are beyond the flesh and be tapped into that too. And a part of the warfare that we're fighting against is learning how to tap into our energetic power and our spiritual power so that we can interact with more feeling, right? But when we're suppressed and repressed in our feelings, this is why we do emotional healing and emotional work, right? Emotional regulation work, because when we're dealing with people, we feel things. This was how they got us ultimately, right? Talking to Black, Indigenous people of color. We've always had a strong empathy. Like, all we want to do is love. All we want to do is connect. All we want to do is share. All we want to do is build. But coming in contact with a consciousness that just wants to take and will deceive and will lie and will manipulate to get what they want and then turn around and lie and do all this stuff, that's trauma in itself. Before, whatever they do is just its own thing. But to come in contact with a consciousness that, again, is opposite of yours, when all you want to do is care and love, they attacked us again at our second chakra, right? I was talking about the root chakra, the I feel, which is the sacral. We question what we feel all the time now, right? And now we're overwhelmed and overstimulated with all types of technology and all types of drama and all types of stuff going on in the world, to where we're out of touch with our intuition. We're out of touch with our sentience and our ability to just feel without talking. If you've ever been in a room where there weren't no words spoken but can feel what's going on, that's what I'm talking about. And we're supposed to be able to do that just day to day. Like, imagine going out to dinner. You have a dinner with someone. You say, hey, let's go out. It's like 4 of y'all. And y'all don't talk the whole time. Y'all just sit at the table. You ever just wonder what would come up? Just feel each other out. You learn how to feel each other. Have a conversation based on how you feel without speaking about it. That's what we used to do back in the day, right? People talk about telepathy and all that. Yeah, exactly. Because we didn't need to say anything. We felt each other. But with all the overstimulation and all of that, we've lost touch with that. We feel like we need to talk about everything. No, we don't. That's exhausting. I'm about to get off here in a minute. Like, talking a lot is not my thing. It's not. Okay? We knew how to feel. We knew how we were in touch with our most divine, innate abilities. But again, coming in contact with something that's the opposite and then being conquered by that genius, sadistic nature, we've lost touch with it. And then we feel like we need to solve problems the same way they do, by talking about it. No, we don't. We can just feel each other out. If we're conscious, if we're aware, you know what I'm saying? But that again, that takes work. I'm just reminding people of the ability that we have, or that you have, the ability that you have to tap into your nature. And I'm just here to remind, because Ancestor's been speaking to me. They've been leading me to, reviewing what happened here, right? And then embodying more intentionally and more consistently the values and the practices and the principles and all of that have been within our DNA and have been within our culture from the beginning of time, right? What was the fact that I read yesterday? There were 500 different tribes, 22 million people living in the land of America before the colonizers got here. 500 tribes. I was reading this book. It's like 365 facts of Native, Indigenous civilization in America. That's what I've been reading recently. And I was one of those in there. 500 tribes before they got here. Another thing I read in there was like, it was a quote from one of the chiefs, and he was saying how within their culture it's so noisy, and you can't hear the trees and the wind and the animals, and that affects how we connect. Ashe. Speaking of Ashe, back to my other point about how they didn't realize they brought together two very powerful people in terms of African and the Native Indigenous. They didn't realize what they were doing, but we knew. And that's why we still here. Honestly, that's why we still here. Because we are that powerful. We just have to remember what we are. We have to remember where we're from. And a lot of us are from here. We're from here. Okay? We're not all from Africa. Like, we have some of our ancestry, but go 2, 3, 4, 5 generations back. We're from here. Okay? We're from here. 500 tribes, 22 million people existed here before colonizers got here. What? So it's like I have this whole idea, you know what I mean, wanting to leave America, but then there's always this thing in me that's like, not yet. Not yet. I mean, this is where I'm from. But this is all, I know this was a lot. I know this was a lot, but I needed to share this. I needed to put this out there because you gotta remember, we gotta remember what we're dealing with out here. Okay, like I said, coming together as community is beautiful. That's what we do. That's part of our nature, to come together and work together and build together. But we need to talk about a lot of the root issue too, in terms of what we're actually dealing with beyond the flesh, in terms of consciousness and spirituality. So with that being said, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. All right. If you're interested in any of the services I have to offer, I offer a free service consultation, actually, 15 minutes, multi-dimensional chit chat. We could discuss spirituality, mysticism, okay, energy work, galactic federations, any of that. Just make sure you read the descriptions thoroughly before you book. I also offer alchemy readings and love life readings. I have a blog that you can check out. I talk about the subconscious mind, masculine, feminine energy, sexual energy. Okay. My book, okay, Word to the Wise, Spiritual Messages for Self and Relationships. It's an ebook. You can find that link in the description, as well as all the other services that I have to offer. Okay. Peace.